So you're applying for a green card, either with USCIS or at the embassy, and you're finding out you need a 601 waiver, and you're just trying to figure out how do you even apply for it? Where do you file it? All of that. I have a whole video on what a 601A waiver is, what a 601 waiver is, and what the process, what evidence you need for that. So be sure to watch that video for the more how-to of it all. But in this video, we're going to be talking about where to file it. Because I've gotten so many questions of people confused of when and where to actually file the 601 waiver. The 601 waiver is different from the 601A waiver. The 601 waiver is more for the different types of things that need a waiver. Whereas the 601A waiver is specifically for unlawful presence in the US, and there's only one way to file it while the beneficiary is physically in the US. I am Attorney Lilian, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system. If your beneficiary is in the US and applying for adjustment of status in the US, there's three ways that you can file this 601 waiver. You can file it with your initial application for a green card. So when you're filing your I-485, you can also file the I-601 waiver application with that. Include the filing fee and send that off with your application. What's going to happen there is because you're sending it with the green card application, it's going to stay together. They're going to take the payment, process everything. And when the officer that's going to make the final decision on your case gets your file, guess what they're going to have in there? They're going to have your green card application and they're going to have the waiver application all at the same time. So when they're making a decision, they can make a decision on both of those. If they choose to waive the interview, they can actually do it because they already have the waiver. And if they're going to approve the waiver, then they can also approve your green card application. If you include that waiver, just know the officer will most likely schedule you for an interview just to make sure that what's in the waiver is actually what needs to be waived and ask you a few questions. That is just normal, okay? Getting an interview is completely normal, especially when you are also applying for a 601 waiver with your application. So that is the first way that you can file this application with your initial green card application filing. If after you already filed your I-485, your green card application, and you realize, oh, I need a 601 waiver, and I did not file that with my initial application, you can still go ahead and file it. What you can do in that situation is just file the I-601 waiver with proof that you have a I-485 pending so that everything gets put together in the same file. And again, the officer can then be able to make a decision, see that you already have the waiver, because guess what? When they're looking at your I-485 and your immigration history and they see that you need a waiver, but they don't see a waiver application in the file, they have no choice but to schedule you for an interview, get more information about the reason that they believe you need that waiver, and then request the waiver. That's a whole other step. That's a whole other thing that you have to wait on. So it's better if you know you need the waiver before you file your I-485, file it with the I-485. If you find out after that you need that waiver, you can file it while your I-485 is pending, and just make sure you include a copy of your receipt notice for that I-485. You will be filing this application at the service center, not at the field office. This means that your case hasn't gotten to the final officer making a decision on it, okay? So you're sending that application before there's an interview. Now, if your case is already scheduled for an interview, you attend the interview, and at the interview, the officer tells you, you are going to need a waiver. I cannot approve your case unless you have a waiver. Well then, they're going to send you a request for evidence or a notice of intent to deny. And what they're going to ask for in that is that you send them the I-601 waiver. Now, please, When they say that, they mean send them a copy of what you're going to send to the service center. Because remember, the USCIS field office does not accept payment for these applications, okay? The Form I-601 has a filing fee. And your local field office, the officer that did your interview, cannot accept that fee. So even though your request for evidence or your notice of intent to deny says to send your I-601 to the field office where you had your interview, that does not mean you just send it there with the payment, because they cannot cash your payment and they will not forward that application to the service center that will actually take the payment. Okay? So if they ask you in a request for evidence or a notice of intent to deny for a 601 waiver, you are going to file it as if you never had that interview. Okay, you're going to file it as if you never had that interview, and then send a copy of what you filed to the field office. Okay, and proof that you filed it to the field office. So depending on if it's a notice of intent to deny or a request for evidence, you may have enough time to file it and get a receipt notice. Most of the time, if you're filing it after a notice of intent to deny, you're not going to have enough time to get a receipt notice. So you need to include proof that you sent it to the service center and that you follow the proper procedure for filing it and paying the fee. Okay? Because if you don't do that, the officer gets your application, they get the fee, they can't do anything with it. They'll just tell you that you never filed it. If you are going to send it after your I-485 is filed, just make sure you keep a copy and bring that copy to your interview with the receipt notice for the filing, because sometimes things don't get into the file and the officer will want to see that waiver right there and they don't need to wait. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are including that I-601 waiver with your interview packet. Whatever you're taking with your interview, make sure you include that waiver that you filed after you filed your green card application. Now, if you're in a situation where you already have the interview, at the interview, the officer tells you you need a waiver because of X, Y, and Z, and you know you qualify for the waiver, you're going to go ahead and file the waiver. But let's talk about how you do it. By the way, if you're getting value out of this video, do not forget to hit that like button. And if you have questions about what I'm talking about, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I look forward to responding to you. I've had so many questions on how to actually file that after the interview. Do you just follow the instructions on the request for evidence or the notice of intent to deny that says to send the application to USCIS where you had your interview? Let's break it down. When you have your interview, the officer tells you, hey, by the way, you're going to need this waiver. I'm going to send you a letter letting you know that we need this waiver. You're going to prepare your waiver. You get the notice, it tells you to send it to the field office where you had your interview. Please pause, stop. Do not send your application with the filing fee to the field office, okay? You need to send it to the lock box, okay? There is an address. So USCIS, for each of their forms, has a place for you to file it. You need to follow that instructions, because that is the only way that you are going to actually get that properly filed. Okay, the local field office where you had your interview, they cannot accept your payment for the form I-601. So you must follow the USCIS instructions for that specific form that's on the USCIS website that tells you which lockbox to send it to. It's usually a PO box. You send it to that PO box with the payment and you wait for a receipt notice. If you only have 30 days to get all of this done, you may not have time to get that receipt notice. But what you do have is a copy of what you filed, proof that you mailed it to the right address, and maybe a copy of the check that you used to send that in. And how do you respond? You send a copy Again, of the I-601 waiver with the supporting documents that you mail to the lockbox, with the proof of mailing or the proof of the receipt notice to the local field office. So you are not sending your fee, right, to the local field office. No, no, no. Please don't do that, because that is the fastest way to get your application denied, because you did not follow the actual instructions for the form that you're filing. So when you get that notice and it says to send it to the local field office, they just want you to send a copy and proof that you filed it. And that will give the officer the chance to actually go ahead and start processing your case again, instead of waiting for the service center to send them the file. You already sent it to them. They can go ahead and start processing your case again. So it is very, very important that you do not miss this point. Okay. And sometimes when people have an interview scheduled, they know they need a 601 waiver and they just take the 601 waiver to the interview with the payment. The officer is not going to take that, okay? Because they cannot process the payment. You have to actually file it with the field office. You have to actually file it with the service center, and then take proof of that filing and a copy of the waiver packet to your interview. Okay, so this is so important. The local field office, in case you missed it, okay? In case you missed it, the local field office cannot take the payment. So you must follow the USCIS instructions on their website that tells you where to file an I-601 waiver. Do not follow the instructions on the request for evidence. Do not just take it to your interview. Follow the instructions that USCIS gives you for where to file the form. And then just take proof of that filing and a copy of what you filed, either to your interview or mail it to your field office that sent you the request for evidence or the notice of intent to deny. Okay, so please don't make this mistake, because it can really hurt you. Now, if you are outside of the US applying for a visa, an immigrant visa to the US, and you need a 601 waiver, you cannot apply for the 601 waiver until after your interview. So you're going to go through the whole steps of uploading all the documents that's required for the visa, for the affidavit of support, wait for your interview to be scheduled, have your interview, knowing that the officer is going to refuse your visa. Okay, if you need a 601 waiver, the officer will always refuse your visa and tell you that you may qualify for a 601 waiver. So then after you get that refusal, now you can file for the 601 waiver and wait for that to be approved. Once it's approved, you can follow up with the embassy that will have the approval and just let them know, hey, this has been approved. Can you schedule me for another interview? They will go ahead and schedule you for another interview, and then they will be able to approve your case. So if you're outside of the US, just know you cannot file it while your I-130 is pending. You cannot file it while you're waiting for an interview. You must wait till you have your interview and the officer refuses you the visa and tells you that you qualify for a waiver, and then, and only then, do you file the 601 waiver. But what can you do in the meantime while your I-130 is pending, while you're waiting for an interview? You can prepare the 601 waiver. You can have everything ready to go so that once you have that interview and your visa is refused, you can go straight ahead and file this I-601 waiver. So once you had your interview and your visa is refused, you can go straight ahead and file the I-601 waiver without any delay, because at this point, you have already prepared everything and you're just waiting for this interview and for this refusal so that you can actually file the application. Okay, so that is the process of actually filing the I-601 waiver, the mechanics of it, okay? It's not just about the documents that you need to prepare. I have a whole video on that, but how to actually file it is also confusing, especially when you are outside of the US or you have an interview coming up and you know that you need the waiver, or you just finished your interview and they tell you you need to file the waiver and send them a copy, but really they mean file it at the right place and then send them proof that you filed it. So it's really, really important that you know how to file this properly so that you are not in a position where your application is being denied or delayed because of this. If you are going through the 601 waiver process and you want to have legal representation, or you want to make sure that you are doing the right steps and basically have someone else take all of that worry and concern about how you're doing off your plate, go ahead and schedule a strategy session with me. Let's see if we can help you make this process as smooth and painless as possible. You can schedule a strategy session with me by going to my website, lilylegal.com, and clicking on contact us, and you can actually select a date and time that works best for you for us to chat. You can also call my office at 508-443-1788. Thank you and have a great one.